So welcome to the AEC Hive podcast. I'm Ralph Montague. I'm the director at ArtDocs, and we're here today to talk about innovation in the AEC sector and building a community of innovators. I'm joined with my fellow co-founder, John Egan. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ralph, and welcome everyone. My name's John Egan. I'm CEO at BIM Launcher, obviously co-founder to AEC Hive, and my interest here today is to talk about innovation from the perspective of a technology vendor and discuss growth in the ecosystem and how that overlaps with community. So I'm looking forward to it.
And we're really excited today to have a really interesting person that we've met recently, Rebecca Lovelace, who is the founder of Building People. And Rebecca, I love your title that you have on your LinkedIn page, Chief Dot Joiner. So joining the dots is really what we're trying to do. So Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe just give us a little bit of a background of where you've come from and how you came to developing Building People?
Sure. Thanks, Ralph, and John. Great to be here. So yes, I took the title Chief Dot Joiner, slightly tongue-in-cheek to get going, but it's actually something that works really well because the point I consistently make is, as an industry, we are very, very good at creating lots of new initiatives, and we are incredibly fragmented. And there's lots of examples of really good best practice. We're just not very good at joining it all together. So the story behind Building People, I've been working within construction and the built environment for over 20 years. And I spent a lot of that time just saying, well, why isn't there one place that just brings together all of these organisations and initiatives that work with diverse audiences, that help people find work experience or jobs or training, information, knowledge? Why isn't there something that just enables this community to exist more cleverly, more coherently? And that's why I set up Building People. So we're a social enterprise, and I'm really looking forward to talking through a bit more detail what it is we're doing, how we're seeking to get there, and how we're looking to consistently to collaborate with everybody else and never to reinvent what already exists, but just to join the dots between what we have already.
That's really good. So I thought we might start by talking AEC Hive is trying to achieve is, I think there's a lot of innovation that's occurring in the AEC sector, but as you said there, it's very fragmented and it's in pockets and it never comes together. So the one part of AEC Hive is just to create community as well. So as I think you had the phrase we spoke previously about community of communities. I think there's an inherent problem in modern society where we don't understand community anymore. John and I have discussed this analogy of tribes, where you had a community and everybody knew they had a different role within the community, but everybody had a sort of a collective sense of the common good to help each other, in a sort of tribe setting. So the tribe was protected and the tribe survived. I think in modern society, people are sort of indoctrined to believe that you have to make it on your own. You're a self-made person. You have to survive on your own. What do you think of? Do you think that we've had a shift in modern society that people don't know how to work together or collaborate?
I think to put a slightly different spin on it, that I would never have come up with the idea of Building People if I was a very commercially driven individual, and I don't have a particularly strong business background, procurement, commercial, and the challenge we have in trying to create this network of networks, this community, this ecosystem, is that it fundamentally has collaboration at its root. And the only pushback we've had has been from people either saying somebody else should be doing this, therefore, it doesn't make sense to support you because it should be, they should be delivered by one of the big industry bodies, or they're saying, well, we're doing it, or sort of part of it, but we're just focusing on our particular sector or our trade, our profession, or our part of industry. So, yeah, perhaps I agree. I think we've lost this sense of community, and I think it's driven by the perceived or the need to make money. And within Building People, I was very clear from the beginning that we have to be a not-for-profit, so we are set up as a community interest company. We also have to be independent, so completely pan-industry, across the whole of the built environment is the language that I use. And for that to happen, we have to make sure we're engaging with everybody. So I've given you a long answer, Ralph, to a short way of saying, yes, there's a real issue. I think technology hasn't particularly helped in that we create many communities, but everything still remains very fragmented.
Just one point I wanted to pick up on what you're saying. Like, why shouldn't communities thrive? I mean, why shouldn't communities make money? I'm just interested in that idea. Why shouldn't communities be commercial as well?
From where I'm coming from, I think if building people were to start out as a very commercial beast, and what we're saying to everybody is we want to create a truly collaborative platform that enables people to access content and opportunities across the built environment. The early feedback I had was, well, is this commercial? By helping you, are we going to, you're going to make some money out of this and potentially be in competition with others that we're working with? So the feedback we got very strongly was, by being a not-for-profit, it was more likely that others would engage with us. And the second part I'd say within that is we are set up as a social enterprise, as a community interest company, but there's no reason that we can't make a considerable amount of profit. We just would plough that profit back into the business. So it's not heading off to the shareholders, it's heading back into the business. So my personal ambition is that we are very commercially successful, which means that we can pay people the appropriate salaries, but also ultimately we can I'd like to fund the initiatives that we're working with, so to provide a more streamlined and coherent way of achieving success rather than this very disparate parochial approach we have at the moment.
John, what do you think about this idea of tribes and communities from your side? Where do you see the challenges, and what sort of questions do you have for Rebecca?
It's interesting because what Rebecca has spoken about so far is, you and I have had many of these conversations, Ralph, and obviously we do see the importance that a community needs to thrive and to engage the right people and almost engage the interests of people. It seems that we need to incentivize them, and a good way to do that is through, like money. I think, it drives us, like the sad reality of it is that it actually drives us on a daily basis to get out of bed in the morning, to keep climbing that career ladder. And it seems to be the language of many people in our industry. And, as a result, I think that it is quite important to be able to provide this incentive. So I suppose, Rebecca, is obviously you're talking about your company is a not-for-profit and it's a pan-industry approach. Have you noticed different stakeholders or different verticals within our industry responding differently? And I suppose everyone in the industry is looking for support in different ways. So, for instance, REBA might be looking for support, might have one goal or mission, and then let's say the property guys in property companies, or not companies but organizations, are in England are called, but what they might have different missions and it's not incentives but goals. How do you kind of draw a parallel common denominator there and make sure that your approach suits the needs of all these different organizations?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, because it's a fairly simple answer, that the sort of three main pillars of building people is that we want to increase diversity across the industry. And I don't think anybody disagrees that that is a real requirement. And increasingly it's being driven by procurement, by the recognition that can win more work by having more diverse members of your workforce. So diversity is a big issue. The other one being around social value. So a lot of requirements now in tenders and, again, government procurement frameworks are around social value. And the last and massively obvious one is we haven't got enough people. There's a real issue here around skill shortages and actual finding competent workers to join our industry. So that to me is universal language. And the challenge we've had is that nobody disagrees, but everybody says, oh, it's a big issue, but it's kind of not really our problem. It's all of our problem. And therefore, this should be being dealt with by, as I alluded to before, the big industry bodies. And And that to me has led to a real sense of frustration. We actually filmed last week. We're going out to crowdfunding in a few weeks, and I did my first attempt at speaking to camera. And I spent probably about 4 hours looking at the camera saying, "Hi, I'm Rebecca Lovelace. I've been in the industry for 20 years." And in the last half hour, we turned it around and I said, "I'm fed up. I didn't plan to be standing in front of the camera. I'm not somebody that seeks attention. I don't really want to be the one shouting about this, but nobody else is." Because the issue is that my interpretation, my experience is that people are concerned within their own particular part of industry. So I walked around industry through most of 2017 saying, why don't we create one place that aggregates all of these initiatives and helps individuals find opportunities? And everybody said, great idea, here's our logo, come back when you've got some money. So again, I'm giving you a wonderfully long answer. You might see a pattern here. But what we found is there were only 3 organisations that actually stood up and said, we will take this on with you on behalf of the industry. And those 3 organisations, University College of Estate Management, the Worshipful Company of Surveyors and the Chartered Surveyors Training Trust. And this has really driven Building People in that we've started off with a focus on surveying from the leadership of these 3 organisations. And the crowdfunding will enable us to go elsewhere. But we found that there's a lot happening in surveying, there's a lot happening within the architects world, all around diversity and inclusion, a lot happening, but silo, fragmented, and no one single body sitting across the built environment to say, we'll own this and we'll drive it. Hence creating Building People.
And if I could just pick up on those 3 pillars, I think those are really interesting. But I suppose I would think that the whole move to innovation and digitization of the AEC sector allows for more diversity because it's becoming less of a heavy labor intensive sector. A lot more effort is going into the digital construction piece of getting it right virtually and engineering it, more thoroughly in technologies. And of course, for that type of work, you don't need, heavy labor. So it's allowing for, a much more diverse, group to participate. And that's how it's making it really interesting. It's still quite low. The adoption of digitization in construction is still quite low. Do you think that the diversity issue is connected to the innovation issue? That, while the construction sector remains a kind of low skill, heavy labor and less digitized, that it's almost forcing a less diverse group? Because diversity actually features in 2 of your 3 pillars.
And it runs across the whole thing. And within diversity, it's not just looking at the gender issue. It's looking at finding more people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic backgrounds. It's looking at LGBTQ+. It's different ages, socioeconomic backgrounds. So I think my answer to that would be that digitalization, of course, should be opening the door. And I'm no expert in the gender, the ethnic makeup of the workforce that are involved in the digital side of things. Hence, we want to collaborate with those that do, those that do, and those that are working in that sector. I think the modern methods of construction and offsite manufacturing is also going to change the way that things work. And so with us, really, because we say we're the enabler, yes, we're seeking to drive change. But the really key thing is that we're seeking to open the door and knock down those barriers. So to help the user find where they can go for support. So just as an example, if you are looking for something within the built environment, so let's just say it's a mentoring group or work experience internship, and you're looking from the perspective of being female. So where, as a female, can I go for some support to find those opportunities? If you look on, I looked on Google, and I did do this a few months ago, so the stats would have changed. But I found something like 15 organisations spread out over quite a few pages. And if you look on the CITB, Construction Industry Training Board, the biggie within our industry, they list, I think it was around 8, but it was those that they have a relationship with. And if you go into Building People, I think at the last count, we've got 76 organisations, all focused on something to do with women within the AEC sector. So whether it's women in property or women into construction, women in manual trades, they're all there. So sort of as this explanation of this example of why we exist, it's not to become the experts on diversity or the experts on community, but to be the enabler to say it's out there, but we just don't know where to look. And nothing is particularly seamless. The pathways are wonderfully convoluted, and nothing's particularly easy to find. And all we're trying to do is become that shop window. And probably a key thing to say is that we have encountered some suspicion in that people sometimes hear that we're looking to create yet another initiative. And the model is absolutely not. We're looking to integrate with and to underpin what already exists. So to sit under the websites of others and just enrich that user experience, or enrich their user content without disrupting the user experience. And is that something that you found within your world, that you've got a big community and a growing community? Do people know where to go within the digital space to get assistance, or is this yet another challenge that we can overcome together?
I think it's absolutely a problem. People don't know where to go, and I think people naturally, if they don't know where to go, they will sort of stick to their own, if you like. They mix in more diverse groups, and therefore they don't understand. And that's across everything. It's across gender, it's across age, it's across nationality. So if you don't know where to go, and you don't mix with diverse groups and learn to understand diverse groups, then you tend to stick to your own. I think that's just a human reaction, is what I feel. But I think this is really interesting, because I think you're unlocking something. Like, if we got diversity sorted, it would solve your third pillar, which is we need more people. Because by being a less diverse sector, we're effectively excluding a whole lot of people from the sector, which could contribute to the sector. I mean, just take age, for instance. In a less digitized AEC sector, as people get older, they feel less useful in a sector that needs strength and labor and heavy labor. Yet people of age have all the knowledge, because they've grown up in the sector, but the digital environment would allow those people to contribute that knowledge to the digital process in an easier way, and so they'd actually become more useful rather than less useful. And that would apply to gender and various nationalities. And everybody knows that digitization allows for better collaboration. So even across countries, we can have a conversation, like we're in different countries having a conversation.
Yes, and that's something that I really want to facilitate. So the example I often use is an individual saying, I'm moving to Birmingham. I want to get into dry lining. Is there somebody I can talk to give me a little bit of a heads up about where I can go, what I can do, and some guidance? And those people exist, and there are forums for those conversations. But again, it's how do you find them? So whether it's somebody looking to move into the trades or the profession, somebody who's been working for years and wants to, as you say, we don't want to lose their expertise. They might want to come back in as a mentor and enable others and open some doors. But it's about that simple, this is what I'm looking for and where can I go? And that's what we've created. So we it's been a long journey, and I'm only slightly jaded, obviously full of enthusiasm as we move into the crowdfunding approach. But what we've done is we've created our proof of concept, and this is a partnership with the CSTT, so the Chartered Surveyors Training Trust. And it's just really simple, because they have their own website, their own IP, their own commercials, their own relationship with employers. CSTT goes into schools, it works with GCSE students, helps them in sort of finding careers and opportunities, particularly within surveying. But if you go into the My Resources section, and it's cstt.org.uk, you can see the little Powered by Building People icon. And what we're showing there is the relationship between one provider that has one audience, i.e. young people, and within that, obviously, diverse individuals, but then they have access to this multitude of content that we've aggregated. And that's really all we're trying to do, is to say these communities exist. how can we tap into them? And it's not just from the perspective of the individual saying, I'm looking for something, but it's also from the employers. How do they find the organisations that work with their particular target audience? So it's a good example we have of one of the employers that uses our platform. They're setting up a new project, I think it was in Northampton, and wanted to know where in that area they could find organisations that work particularly with young people. And Building People could tell them that, because all we're trying to do is drive traffic and signpost, and it truly is very non-threatening for all the listeners out there that might be wanting to learn a lot more and would like to get involved.
Yeah.
It would be good to talk more about how AEC Hive and Building People can collaborate, because I think it could be a great example of what we're seeking to do is enable connections, and what you've done is to create a community. And I think, as you're saying, that focus on innovation community is a really nice place from which to start.
Absolutely. And so I suppose what we try to do is do something similar, but do it in the spirit of innovation, in doing something different. So take that example that's used of the person moving to Birmingham about dry lining. We don't just want them to learn about dry lining. We want them to connect to somebody who's maybe investigating robotics in dry lining, so that there's something different. We can't just do dry lining the way we've done dry lining for the last 20, 30 years, because that's not innovative, and it's just perpetuating a way of doing things that is problematic. So, I mean, the way construction happens at the moment is problematic. We have a massive impact on the sustainability. The construction industry is responsible for something like 40% of the CO2 emissions. We waste a lot of material. So something like 30% of material that gets produced actually gets wasted in the construction process and ends up back in landfill, which is crazy if you think about it. We're taking raw materials out of the ground at great expense to the environment, making them into finished products, paying for them, delivering them to site, getting people to handle them on site, and putting them into a skip, taking them away, and putting them back in landfill. So we can't perpetuate dry lining the way dry lining has always been done. We need to connect the people who are experts in dry lining with people who are doing other stuff, which the dry lining is more designed and digitized, and the boards that are actually required are ordered and delivered and maybe even pre-cut to the right height, so there's less waste. I suppose what AEC Hive is trying to do is give people those kind of ideas, to say, do what you do best, yes, but also think about how can we improve. And every element of construction needs to improve, like from dry lining to plumbing to electrical to bricklaying to better ways of doing things. As a whole, construction needs to improve. That's our thing, innovation. And even the connection between John and myself. I'm an architect. I haven't practiced architecture design for many years because we've specialized 10 years ago in BIM consultancy. So our function has been more around management and on management of projects and information management. But I understand how things work because of a long history in the sector. John's background in software development, he also has a background in construction and architecture, but specializing in software development. That connection between John and I has created so many great ideas. Wouldn't you say, John? I mean, I hope you think that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just taking myself off mute there. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Ralph.
Yeah. So that's connecting two dots. I suppose if we could connect more people like that with different backgrounds, different understandings, but working towards a common goal in the AEC sector of improving the way we do things. So that's what we see innovation is, doing things better in the AEC sector. But the community side for us is this connecting of the dots, as you say, getting people of diverse backgrounds in expertise, so software developers, people interested in technologies, so that's what we think of diversity, not only about the usual things of gender, age, and nationality, but diversity in expertise, where we can have people from different backgrounds talking about how do we get out of our bubble of the way we think about things and become better at what we do.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting, how you've met and you two have had some very powerful conversations and different backgrounds. And I know when I started off in industry, my background is working in the homelessness and international humanitarian aid sector, and I ended up in construction as then completely accidentally. And for years I felt quite fraudulent because I wasn't an engineer by profession. I didn't have a trade. I didn't have a qualification in the industry. And my specialism was identifying that in one part of where I was working, there are individuals that wanted opportunities, and on the other side there are organisations with the opportunities, but the connectivity between the two was really, really poor. But for a long time, and I felt sort of as if I was almost singing a lone song, because the big emphasis was around health and safety and incident and injury free when I started, and then it was environmental sustainability, and then it became CSR. We're now moving more into social value, diversity and inclusion. So I do think it's the time to do something, and the willingness and the interest is there. And I realised I didn't need to be an expert in the industry, because the experts are there. Just what is missing is that collaborative framework to enable people to come together. And I do some really clear points stand out. I remember a workshop and saying, this must be about 10 years ago now, but who is doing something in this diversity space? And all the hands went up. And who is doing this collaboratively, working with one of their peers and an equivalent contractor or consultant? And every hand went down. And so that's what has driven me, is that we know it's there. And yes, there'll always be some reticence, because we have to make money, and there's certain requirements around USPs or around individual points of competitiveness. But actually, there is a real desire, I think, for change, and a real recognition it's needed. But we have a great habit of just creating new initiatives rather than just saying, why don't we enable what we have already? So I do think the community that you're building, and the way that AEC Hive is operating, so if I'm right, you're sort of creating hives where you get people together to focus on particular challenges. Is that right?
So our goal over the next few years is to have this community spread around the world, and that groups of people would form their own little work teams, if you like, called clusters. So somebody could come up with an idea, say, I want to solve dry lining in Birmingham. Like I want to make it better. And so they can sort of define their challenge, put it on our platform and say, this is what I would like to do. Other people would be looking through all the sort of clusters and saying, that sounds like something I'd like to contribute to. So they would apply to join the cluster, and that would connect those two or three people or four people, in a challenge. And they would talk about that, but then in some time during the year in that location, 2 or 3 clusters would come together and say, let's have a weekend event, a swarm, where we come together for a weekend. We socialize on the Friday. In other words, we get to meet each other in person and talk. But on the Saturday, we spend 12 hours really putting some focused effort into our challenge. And then on the Sunday, you present what you've come up with, what you've thought about, FitSwarm. But then you go away, having done that sort of concerted effort, continue your project with, in your cluster. And so these projects continue to live on. And you might come back 6 months later to another swarm and present, how far you've got. So it's really just about connecting what people are doing. Like you made a really interesting point there about, everybody putting their hand up about diversity and then putting their hand down saying, well, like, how are you connecting that? I think it's the same thing about innovation. If you asked anybody in a room in the AEC sector, are you doing innovative stuff in your business, in your projects? I think every hand would go up. If you said, are you doing that innovation across projects or across a diverse group of disciplines, I think every hand would go down. So it's the same problem, that innovation is happening in the AEC sector, but it's not connected.
What would be, my mind is sort of leaping ahead. We've got a big event, and it's the early stage of planning in October of this year. And I've made a personal commitment that that's when we're going to say we've been out to crowdfunding, and from that we have delivered it won't be the full bells and whistles version of Building People, or maybe it will be if we get the support we're anticipating. And and at that event is when we're going to really say to industry, if you want this, you want to get behind this, then this is something here right now. So we'll have moved from just the initial focus has been young people surveying and static content. And in our next phase, we're going to move, we think, to connecting that same audience, but to events, to mentors, to networking groups, and also to opportunities such as work experience. So we'll have a fully functioning platform that enables that connectivity with initially one audience, but because we're going to stick within this surveying sphere and grow both audience and activity, we're going to also, we believe, move to wider audience than young people, so looking more at gender and ethnicity and bringing that in. So we've got a plan for October in partnership with a big industry provider, and part of that will be let's get the right people together to say this is what we've created with Building People, almost using your language, creating that sort of cluster of organisation individuals, and have a swarm to then say how can we make this as brilliant as possible. Where do we go next? We move to another profession, or are we going to go and focus on our trade? Or maybe by that point we might have moved out, because we have interest in bringing this to the next military market. We have interest in taking this to certainly as a few professions and trades that we're talking to. So I think we've got an opportunity to be clever with the platform you have and what we have. And certainly we've got AEC Hive as one of the organisations that can be found on our platform. And the platform at the moment is a little bit clunky. So we've only got trades professions that are doing something. So if for example, I added, I think, fenestration recently, because we found that fenestration's got a good campaign going. So there's a real call to action here. Is if you're doing anything within the work learning support space. So whether you're offering vacancies or opportunities, or you have content, go to buildingpeople.org.uk and add your organisation, as we've done with AEC Hive. And that means then that people can find you. So I think it'd be good to explore, maybe not necessarily now, but how the community you've created we can connect that with the communities we're creating, so that people can have the idea if they want to do something to stick with Birmingham and dry lining, but then there's a real audience out there they can reach that might not necessarily be those on the digital side, but they have that digital knowledge without necessarily seeing themselves as digital people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what I really like about what you're doing is the way you're opening it up. So it's not really purely about your platform, but you're allowing other platforms. So, for instance, AEC Hive to have a function that's sort of powered by Building People, search capability within other platforms. So you're creating that sort of connectedness between platforms, and that's something you're really interested in, John. That sort of connecting systems of systems.
Yeah,
and open sourcing stuff is. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah. I suppose as you've been talking there, Rebecca, I've been kind of sketching out how I see the interaction between Building People and different verticals, and how your platform, I suppose the mechanics of it is actually making it work as a platform, which is quite interesting, because I suppose my initial thoughts was around the pattern that I picked up on was you're trying to provide joined up solution for people that is looking for everything from work experience to knowledge sharing, internships, jobs, all that's underpinned by the three pillars like your diversity and your skilled worker initiative. And I was thinking, is AEC Hive to innovation what building people is to community, and how would they work together. Innovation is almost common, could even be your fourth pillar. So it's not even, it's not even exclusive to what you're doing. And what we're hoping to achieve is obviously provide resources such as people that are in the industry that want to help other people innovate, a list of applications that people can use to innovate, APIs, technical resources, various different things. And we're trying to support our vertical, I suppose, that would sit on your platform. So we're trying to connect the dots within one of your dots, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does very much so. And just going back to, so at the moment, so we've had to separate, we've got content and we've got organisations, and we've had to separate the two because what you're looking at is proof of concept. And ultimately, we want to make it really easy. I am looking for, let's just say, organisations that can help with innovation, specifically within BIM in this part of the country or globally, etc. So that's all we want to do is just be almost sort of the spider's web that holds it together, or the shopping mall where you can find what you want. So and how we've created it has been a really simple exercise. We got some funding from the Institution of Civil Engineers in the early days, and we've just created if we found somebody doing something in bricklaying that's relevant, we create something called bricklaying, rather sort of a title, a category for bricklaying, and the same for, let's just say, project management. And if we don't find something, then that doesn't exist. And it's as I say, it's a bit clunky, and we needed a big piece of work around the taxonomies and the data structure so that it's more easily searchable through occupations, we think. But the challenge we've got is, would somebody new to industry particularly know which occupations to search under? So then we might need to build a bit of a profile piece in to help people understand what they're looking for. Or is it more about breaking it down to capture something like, say, innovation? So what we're looking for the ultimate, the users to say, we wanted to work like this. And this is what we're doing with the crowdfunding, that our seed funding has helped us create the proof of concept. And the crowdfunding now is get involved, help us make this happen, but tell us what would work for you. So in terms of AEC Hive, you could actually define how you'd like building people to reference the innovation, the digital side of things, because we don't pretend to be the experts in this. We just are, as I say, the home that brings it all together. So I think certainly what we have with our platform, how our platform can grow and support you is absolutely a key conversation that we're having. So that's good.
And it's fascinating how things are changing, where previously the focus is always on the dots. It's about this technology or this institution or, this, university, or you have to be the best dot. But now people are realizing, it's impossible just to have one dot that covers every eventuality, and that you do actually need to connect the dots. So I think both with AEC Hive and building people, the focus is not on the dots, but on the connections between the dots. How do you cross-pollinate information, skills, opportunities between institutions, between learning academies, between organizations, between technologies, is actually the more interesting thing than the dot itself.
And I think absolutely, Ralph. And so I guess my question to you, within your world, who or what are the big dots that should be part of AEC Hive? And are there any that are missing that just aren't engaging with you? Provocative here.
Well, I suppose we're not too concerned about the dots, is the answer, is what I was saying there, is we're more interested in trying to create the framework where once a dot decides they should be part of this community, they are able to do that. And, so look, we have attempted to connect with the major players in Ireland anyway, the Institute of Architects, the Engineers Ireland, which is the institute that looks after the engineers, the Construction Industry Federation, which is the institute that looks after contractors, the learning institutes that we have connections with, so the universities and the technical colleges, the organizations that support innovation in a formal way. So we have a group called Enterprise Ireland, which is sort of developing capability in Ireland on behalf of the government for exports. And then the Science Foundation Ireland is the major body that has a number of research institutes. So those are, I would say, are the big players. But like you, we don't really see them fully engaging until we have enough scale. They'll say, well, it's interesting what you're doing, but you're not big enough.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not too concerned. We're probably more concerned about creating the framework where dots can connect and beginning to create some scale, so that by the time people look at us and say, wow, you're actually doing amazing things, we want to be part of that, we can say, well, that's really easy because we have the framework that you can connect into that. And then I suppose what's more important to us is that innovation around the world, I spend a lot of time looking at what's happening in other countries. And so different countries are at different stages of innovation and doing interesting things. But it's very difficult, like you say, to find out. You've got to spend a lot of hours on the internet kind of looking at stuff, reading papers, watching YouTube videos, and not everybody has that time. So, we want to create a platform where people in Canada, people in America, people in Europe, in France, Germany, Scandinavia, where they're doing something interesting, and they say, actually, we would like what we're doing to be known to the rest of the world, that they can also connect to the spider web, as you said, and therefore the good work that they're doing can be spread through a wider community. And if somebody in America sees that somebody in Scandinavia is doing something that is of interest to them, then they have that connection and they can develop that into a combined initiative or project.
I absolutely love that. I love that global approach. People have asked me where will building people stop? And when I started to try and get off the ground back in 2017, I partnered with a big consultancy firm that was potentially going to back it. And when somebody says they're interested in supporting you, you grab it in those early days. And they were talking about flying me off to South America to talk to people about what we've delivered and what we've created. And it all seemed somewhat far-fetched at the time. And so we've been very much focusing on, let's create something, one audience, one profession, one activity, and then develop it. But I'd absolutely love to see building people having that same reach, in that it is just about sharing that knowledge, isn't it? It's about enabling people to understand where they can go. And we're a global society now, so there's no reason not to. And maybe it's more, ours is maybe a bit more practical, which is I'm looking for something in an area, and then you go on to within your platform then let's have those conversations and let's take develop from that. But I do think there's something clever we can do about joining these communities together, because we're approaching the same challenge, aren't we? But from different angles. So it's very nice.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the things we're not trying to be is overtake what other people are doing in other places, because there's fantastic initiatives and groups that have developed around the world, and we're not trying to come in and say, well, we want to take over what you're doing. We don't want at all. We just want to connect what you're doing to what other people are doing. What you're doing is known to a bigger group of people. So just to make what people are doing around the world less insular and more widespread, which is to their benefit, obviously, because you could be doing some fantastic research on a highly innovative process or product or material, or in your town, in your city, or in your university, or in your company, but if nobody else knows about it, it's not going to have the impact that it would if many people knew about it. And that's the problem in the AEC sector. I mean, you can go into, I used to work for a very big architectural practice, and you have 100 projects, and there was fantastic innovation happening in those projects. But even within the organization, people didn't know what the other team were doing. There wasn't a sharing of that innovation. And that sort of fragmentation leads to a position where the impact of that innovation is only on that one single project. And then 3 weeks later, a different team within the same organization would begin to research the very thing that the other team has already spent 6 months researching.
Yes.
So if that fragmentation is happening even within organizations, you can imagine how bad it is across a sector, in a country and across a sector globally. There's a lot of people just doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, and I'd say, because that's the same message that I've been given out, that I think people do hear, but there's still a case of, we want them to come to, others say to me, we want them to come to our platform. We want our platform, our website to be the place. And that's fine, because we don't want to stop people innovating, and people will often want to be the main point of contact, the platform. And what we're saying is, we just want to sit underneath. So we found almost 1,000 organisations, predominantly England, Wales, Scotland, a bit of Northern Ireland, and these include sixth forms, further education and higher education. And then there's some private training providers, not many, and we've got a lot of charities, social enterprises, and they're all doing something in this work learning support space across the built environment. And what we're saying is, let's just call it around 1,000. If each of those were to have a digital connection to building people, so they either adopt the CSTT model, whereby we white label a very low cost, high functionality website that they can use, their own branding, their own management, but it integrates with the building people platform, or they have another means of connecting in through an API or an iframe or something. And then what that means is, those 1,000 organizations, rather than all existing in isolation, they all have just this connection to this community. And within that community, it has these opportunities listed. So whether it's, here's a podcast to listen to, or a game to play, or a PDF to read, or a job to apply for, a vacancy to research, it's all within this big, if you want something, another analogy is, why fish in a small pond when you can fish in the ocean? And it's just building people sitting underneath and enabling. So I hear what you're saying about definitely not duplicating effort, merely enabling what's already out there to just be so much more efficient and effective.
So, I mean, we could probably speak all day, but I think what we've seen today anyway is a practical connecting of two dots. What building people are doing and what AEC Hive are doing, and that they're not sort of initiatives that can't exist together. They can, and that if you connect them, they can support each other. So, as an example to the industry of what can happen, I think even this conversation today is fascinating. It's how it should work. This is how community should develop and how innovation can spread. John, do you want to have any sort of closing remarks?
Like you said, Ralph, it's really exciting to see other initiatives trying to do similar things to what we're trying to do with AEC Hive in a different way. Definitely think that there's room for collaboration, because there is no way that, I suppose, one organization, I think, can facilitate or carry the weight of this industry on its shoulders itself. Rebecca, I'd like to thank you for joining us and sharing your insights. It was really, really great to hear what you're up to with building smart, or building people, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can collaborate in the future.
Likewise, John. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you both, John, Ralph, for having me. And it's great, partly just to share our message and encourage people to get involved, to upload details, to talk about what they're doing so we can amplify voices and drive traffic. And it's also really good just to explore in a bit more detail what we can do together. I think there's a really big opportunity. So let's continue that conversation. But in the meantime, a huge thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, John. Because we're really excited to have joined Building People and be part of that and see how we can contribute to that. And we're really excited that you've joined AEC Hive, and we invite you to, obviously we'll share this podcast with everybody in the AEC Hive community, but if you're monitoring what's happening in the community traffic on Twitter and LinkedIn, if you feel you have anything to contribute or any discussions you want to get going, please feel free to do that. So, thank you both. That was really interesting.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you.